Okay. You ready? Hello, my name is
edIT.
I'm from Los Angeles, California, and I'm a professional crowd slayer. The way I would describe my music in the simplest terms is just hip-hop. I got started in music with probably my pops. I think I was 8 or 9. He gave me the Rolling Stones Big Hits tape with Satisfaction on it, and I was just like, psh, this is the coolest thing of all time. This is edIT, and you're watching my episode of The Craft.
Yeah, the kicks out and back of the beat.
My music essentially is my baby, and it has to be perfect, and I'm not gonna let it go until I feel that it's absolutely cherry. My musical background began to take shape when I came out to college. In 1997 in Los Angeles, I went to the University of Southern California. At the time, I was really into the rave scene, jungle music, and hip-hop, golden era hip-hop. I realized that I was the only kid on the scene, basically, and the people that I knew who even went to college. So I was just like, okay, well, how can I sort of keep this going and still be stoked on this music without having to go to these raves? And I was like, I got it. I'll just buy myself a pair of turntables. I got myself a pair of turntables, and I went down to the radio station on campus, KSCR, to have somebody teach me to use the turntables. The day that I show up, the two people sitting in the studio, one was my friend Alfred, who is now the artist known as Daedalus on Ninja Tune and Mush. Another was my friend Frosty, who was responsible for starting this internet radio station called Dublab. I was able to meet DJ Hive, who's gone on to be the most prominent US drum bass producer there is today, and my friend Daddy Kev. Both of them had this label called Celestial Recordings, and they were working closely with a lot of people in Project Blowed and the Freestyle Fellowship, but they also had a drum and bass division as well too. So it was kind of like this label that was releasing drum and bass records, and they were releasing indie hip hop records at the same time. So this was kind of like where I really began to get exposed to LA indie hip hop and Freestyle Fellowship and all that stuff, because I came from the East Coast and I had no idea who these guys were. And at first I thought it was all like really weird, and I couldn't understand why they were like rapping like so strangely, and like I just wanted to hear some like guru style flows. These guys were just coming with the strangest like Bone Thugs and Harmony style, and I was just like, wow, this is just like so strange.
Give me a funky ass bass line.
Came to my creative process during a time when I was jobless, out of college, and I was essentially at a crossroads. And at that point, I made a conscious decision that, okay, I'm essentially going to stop DJing on a weekly basis and begin to try and make my own music, which I can play out. LA indie hip hop and LA drum and bass was like my cup of tea. But my roommate was, basically collecting and DJing all these like really weird experimental records, Aphex Twin, Autechre, Lexan Cult, Telephone Tel Aviv, Boards of Canada, like all that kind of stuff. And I just kind of like walk by his room and listen to this stuff, and I'd be like, wow, that's crazy. And like I really had no knowledge of it. And eventually I just kind of decided, I was like, I bet I could probably make some stuff like that, but in my style, So I essentially spent the next 8 months trying to essentially figure out what I was gonna write. Like I knew I wanted to write a record, but I had no idea what it was going to be about. And I basically just like went for it. And, it took another month or two of noodling around, and eventually I came up with essentially the first track for Crying Over Pros for No Reason. When I stumbled on it, I was like, this is it. This is going to be the sound of this next project. There's always a defining moment where I write one song and I'm like, this is it. Like I've stumbled on something new within myself, and this is what this next project's gonna sound like. On Certified Aryan Material, that track was Battling.
Come on!
Battling came about from the Dumbfound remix, but it was sort of like the next evolution from that, me trying to figure out what I was trying to say.
Come on!
Club hip hop ultra hyper edits, glitch techniques and stuff like that, like all mashed into one thing. Really, when I laid that track down, I was like, my inspiration is to write what hip hop music will sound like in the future. My studio is primarily based around a computer because it gives me the utmost flexibility to make changes. I think due to the nature that I write albums and essentially that there's like multiple growth periods that happens, there needs to be an extreme amount of flexibility for change. Or for me to essentially completely change the idea altogether at any point in time, but maybe just keep the drums. I'm very visual, you know, like I'm just looking at waveforms and like dots, and it's almost like painting a picture essentially. I'll just already have the picture written in my head of where everything needs to be laid out. And that's a very different thing than somebody who uses the MPC traditionally and like plays it all in with the pads. The point from where the idea starts, like when I finally have that light bulb go off where I write that one song where I'm like, this is it, this is gonna be the sound of this album, to the point where it ends, essentially the album will probably develop 3 times over. There'll be one creative spurt where like I'll write the first track and then 10 small ideas will come from that. You know, and then by the time I'm done with the 10th idea, I will have accumulated so much knowledge production-wise and just like everything in general, you know, like in the studio or using new tools or new technologies will come out that I'll be like, oh snap, I have to incorporate all that into those last 10 songs. And then I'll do it again. I'll begin to incorporate all the stuff that I've learned to the point where like when I'm done with those 10 songs again, like another growth period has happened, a big one, you know? And when I reach that 10th song again, I'm like, oh man, like I've learned so much again. Now I've got to go back and reapply all that again. And so it just keeps on happening until the point where like, okay, this is it. This is the best that I can do at telling this story at this point in time. At that point, you let it go. A certain part of me really wants like all these records to be timeless. I've become to realize that I'm not going to be one of those types of artists who's going to be able to release hundreds and hundreds of records or hundreds and hundreds of albums. So everything I put down has got to be 100% dope in my book. It's got to be as sick and as dope as the day I made it to when I'm 70 chilling on the porch with my grandchildren. That's how I view my music, and that's why it takes so long to write 2 10-song albums that don't exceed 45 minutes. There's no filler. All those 10 tracks on both of those albums, I love all of them to death. And no song was put on there just cause. You know, every single one of those tracks have equal importance to me. These albums are just like leaving a memoir or a picture of like where I was at that moment in time and what I was all about. You know what I'm saying? Craft EP01 marked a very sentimental and specific moment in my life. You know what I'm saying? And that moment will probably never be able to be recreated. And I probably won't revisit that sound unless I've grown enough, you know, as a producer and an artist, and my skill set has grown enough essentially that I can like top that album. So if I can't top that album, I will probably never revisit that sound.